Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tammy Stackelhaus, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with FibroFog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tammy Stackelhaus, episode 69. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhaus, and today's episode is a two-part Ask the Coach. As you know, we have been doing an Ask the Coach episode every 10 episodes. Now, normally that would be next time, but I've had a couple of really great questions come in that kind of go together. So I'm doing a two-part, one in this episode and then part two in our next episode. We are answering the question today, I was newly diagnosed, what do I do now? And I would normally read a listener shout out for this, but I have to tell you, when I went looking for the email that I received, I had so many emails that sounded just like this. I was just diagnosed. What should I do now? That I'm not really sure who it was that triggered this. When I was just looking, I found emails from people in South Africa and Sweden and the UK and Canada and the US and young and working and students and mothers. It was really just all kinds of everybody. So I sat down, spent a few minutes and thought back to my own fibromyalgia journey, as well as what I do with a brand new client who is recently diagnosed. And I came up with 5 things that you can start doing right now on your own that will help you improve your fibromyalgia, but also help your doctor help you better. And 5 things that you can do, places to start with your doctor. So let's dive in. So the first thing that you need to do if you have been newly diagnosed with fibromyalgia, you have to educate yourself. Now, you're here, you're listening to the podcast, so you've already started on this one. So yay, gold star for you. But definitely go back and listen to old episodes. I would highly recommend episodes 4 and 5. Episode number 4 is where I kind of give the history of fibromyalgia, some of the science and the research that's been done. And then episode number 5, I interview Dr. Ginevra Lipton. She is the medical director of the Frida Center for Fibromyalgia, and she is the author of several books. Most popular is the Fibro Manual, which is a great treatment guide both for you and for your doctor. And we will have links to all of these episodes that I'm going to mention. There's a bunch of them I'm going to mention today, as well as the books that we mentioned. So go back, listen to episode 4 and 5. I would also recommend listening to episode 21. That is an interview I did with Dr. Jared Younger, and he talks about some of the more recent research that's actually in process right now. So that is a great one for you to listen to. Of course, I would definitely recommend that you read my books. And the cool thing is you can get copies of those for free. Just go to today's show notes. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/69. And we will have links where you can download both copies of my books for free. If you are newly diagnosed, I would recommend starting with my first book, which is Take Back Your Life. And that is really my version of a treatment guide, fibro patient to fibro patient, and what I do with my new clients that I work with and kind of where we start. So I would definitely recommend that. The other way that you can educate yourself, for those of you, if you're like me and you want to know as much as you possibly can, and you want to learn everything, not just, the foundational stuff like you might find in this podcast or in my book, but you want to know everything, then I would recommend checking out our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor program. Now, I've talked about that a lot on our podcast here. In fact, back in episode 67, I interviewed some graduates from this class, so you can go back and take a look at that. But this class is 9 classes with me where we dig into everything I can teach you in 9 weeks. We talk about sleep, and we talk about pain, and we talk about managing your energy. We talk about nutrition. We talk about supplements. We talk about medication, alternative treatment options, really everything. It also includes you working one-on-one with your own fibromyalgia coach. So, like I said, for those of you who really want to learn everything, as in more than what your doctor has been taught in medical school, then go check out the Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class so that you can make sure you are truly educated as a patient so that you can make the best decisions for yourself and for your care. You can't make good decisions if you don't have enough information, right? So educate yourself. That is number 1. Number 2 that you can do right now is find yourself a guide for this journey. Having fibromyalgia is not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is not a day trip. This is a lifelong journey. So you want to make sure that you find someone who can show you those shortcuts, who can support you and give you wisdom from their journey and bounce ideas off of and get new ideas when you're stuck. So find a guide to support you. Now, I want you to notice that I've used the word guide, and I've done that specifically. This doesn't necessarily have to be your doctor. It may be a coach. It may be another friend who's lived with fibromyalgia for years. It may be a family member, a spiritual advisor, who knows? It could be anybody, but it needs to be somebody who has been where you want to go. You guys have probably heard the saying, right? Never take advice from someone you wouldn't want to trade places with. And that goes for your fibro journey as well. And you've probably experienced this even as a newly diagnosed person, that there are lots of people out there giving advice. And a lot of people are giving advice that don't have fibromyalgia and maybe just read some little, blurb on Facebook as they were scrolling past, right? Those aren't the people to consider a guide. You want to have a guide who has been where you want to go. So consider that and consider who that might be in your life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with hiring somebody to fulfill this role for you. It's what we do with personal trainers. It's what we do if we hire a tutor because we need to be better at math than we are, right? So it's totally okay to hire somebody. Just remember, never take advice from someone you wouldn't want to trade places with. And that goes for criticism too. Don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't trade places with, because if you wouldn't trade places with them, they have no idea what it's like walking in your shoes. So number 2, find a guide to support you. Number 3, I want you to start tracking your fibromyalgia symptoms. Now, there's a few ways you can do this and a few reasons to do this. One of the biggest reasons is just simple awareness. A lot of times the word mindfulness gets thrown around and we think that that's equivalent to meditation. But mindfulness really is about being mindful. It's about being aware. And a lot of us really are just kind of getting through the day, and we're not all that aware of what's actually happening. So the first thing to do is just start a super simple tracking log. And we'll have a link in today's show notes where you can download a simple tracking log where you're just going to jot down a number every day. What's my pain level? What's my fatigue level? And there's also a little place for you to note any things that you are doing, like taking an extra painkiller or going to get a massage or whatever it might be, taking an Epsom salt bath, those extra treatments, not the things you do every day, but the extra things that you do. So go to today's show notes. Again, it's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/69, and you'll be able to download this symptom tracking log and just start keeping track of that. This is really, really important for you, even if you don't have a doctor that you're seeing yet that's really treating you. Maybe you've got a diagnosis, but now you're waiting for a referral to a specialist to treat you. Start tracking those numbers, because when you go to your doctor with a sheet that shows that you've been at a 7 and an 8 for 6 weeks, that tells them something completely different than if you're like, I'm at a 7 or an 8 today, right? There's a big difference between I hurt a lot today and I hurt a lot and have hurt a lot for a long time, right? So start tracking that so you can take that information with you when you go to your doctor. The second thing I want you to track is your steps. In episode 35, I talk about my favorite energy management tool, and that is a pedometer. I use my Apple Watch, but I've used, just a standalone pedometer. I've used my phone, just making sure that I carry it with me. But knowing how many steps I walk is a really good way for me to estimate how much energy I've got left, right? So I'm not going to give you the whole episode 35 again right now. You can go back and listen to that. We'll have the link in today's show notes. And you just listen to that. It'll teach you how to use a pedometer to help manage your energy. But starting to track that now will help you in the long run for how to better manage yourself, breaking that push crash cycle, or as some of you out there call it, boom and busters. That's not so much what we say here in the US, but breaking that is important. And the way that you do that is by better managing your energy budget. So start tracking your steps. Now, along with this idea of awareness and mindfulness and being conscious of what's happening in your body, number 4 is to start your body's owner's manual. I call this the Book of You. And in episode 47, I actually tell you how to start keeping track of this. So again, not going to give you the whole episode 47 right now. You can go listen to that. But the idea in a nutshell is that you start making a note of the things that you're learning about your body. I would approach this with an attitude of curiosity, kind of pretend like you just moved into a new body and you're trying to learn what this new body likes and doesn't like, what it can do, what it can't do, and making note of that because, with fibro fog and everything else, we often don't remember, right? So make a note of this. It could be anything from, wow, I feel terrible when I eat a bunch of carbs and then wake up the next day, I feel terrible. Or it could be, wow, if I have an Epsom salt bath, that really helps me recover when I've overdone things. It could be things like, an ice pack helps if I hurt in this spot, but a heating pad helps for this other spot, right? So maybe you ice your neck and you use a heating pad on your lower back. So writing those things down so that you can reference them and remember them. Starting your body's owner's manual, what I call your Book of You. That's number 4. Number 5, which is a really important one, and we will talk about that with the 5 things that you start doing with your doctor. Many of them relate to this one that you can start right now, and that is calming your overactive fight or flight response. One of the super fun things about fibromyalgia is that our fight or flight is sort of stuck into overdrive, right? Dr. Lipton in one of her books talks about it as, we're always sort of sleeping with one eye open because we're just waiting for that saber-toothed tiger to jump out and get us, right? Like we're always on alert and we're always in that place of stress. And so anything you can do now to start calming that down will actually help your symptoms in the long run. So calming your overactive fight or flight, that can be doing things like breathing exercises, yoga, meditation, coloring, even things like knitting and crafts can be very meditative and very calming. Baths, neutral baths, so water that's not too hot, not cold, those can be extremely calming to your nervous system. So again, with number 4, where we're starting to keep track of the things that your body likes and doesn't like, as you try things for number 5 here with calming your overactive fight or flight, just make a note of what works and what doesn't work for you. For instance, I see this all the time. I'll have people who tell me, oh, I can't do meditation. And as I ask them some questions, some people have trouble with meditation because they just physically have trouble sitting still. It may be painful for them, or maybe they just fidget a lot. And for those people, a walking meditation, like walking a labyrinth or even just going for a walk and being meditative, that can be very effective. Some other people have a really hard time like having their mind be still. They have no problem sitting there, but their brain is all over the place, and it actually causes them anxiety to try to meditate. And for those people, doing a guided meditation where you're actually listening to somebody else guiding you, that can be very effective because it gives their brain a little bit of something to do. So as I said, make note of the things that you try and the results that you have as you're writing your body's owner's manual, as you're writing your book of you. But try some of these things to begin to calm down your overactive fight or flight. Now, those are the 5 things that you can do right now on your own, should start doing right now on your own. If you're newly diagnosed, and of course, if you've had fibromyalgia for a while and you're not doing these, then we need to do that. But for those of you who are just now diagnosed, start with these. Educate yourself, find yourself a guide, start tracking your symptoms, begin writing your body's owner's manual, and then work to calm your overactive fight or flight. Okay, now I've got 5 things for you to work on with your doctor. So this could be your regular primary care, your GP. This could also be if you've been referred to somebody to treat your fibromyalgia, then obviously talk to them as well. But these 5 things are not dependent on you having a fibromyalgia specialist. Any doctor should be able to help you with these things. So number 1, and the first thing we need to address with fibromyalgia is to help you get better sleep. So work on improving your sleep. Now, I know you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh yeah, good job, because I can't sleep. So how am I even going to work on this? This is not even a possibility. And I want you to know that there's actually a lot that can be done, and do the best you can. So you notice I didn't say fix your sleep, because this may be, like it is for me, a lifelong thing that you work on. My sleep is the cornerstone of everything that keeps me healthy, but it's also the key thing that I have to keep working on because it's easy for me to slip. And next week, when I talk about what I actually do to manage my fibromyalgia and keep things in remission, I will talk about my sleep and the challenge. So I want to give you some numbers here so that you understand why this is so important. You are going to want to have a sleep study. Unless you've had a sleep study in the last year or 2, you need a sleep study. Sleep apnea in the general population, depending on if you're a man or if you're a woman, it's going to be between 2 and 7% of the population is diagnosed with sleep apnea, which, if you're not familiar, sleep apnea is where you actually stop breathing at night. There's many reasons you could stop breathing. Your brain might not send the signal telling you to breathe, or it could be that, your airway closes off and you can't breathe. Doesn't necessarily mean you're snoring. You might not, but you're unable to get oxygen. Now, the normal population, again, that is 2 to 7%. For people with fibromyalgia, it's 45%, which means you're listening to this podcast, you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, you have almost a 50-50 chance of having sleep apnea. So get a sleep study done. Like seriously, it's like flipping a coin, right? And heads, you've got it, tails, you don't, right? So we've got to get this addressed. There is no amount of supplements that you take or, pain meds. In fact, pain meds can make this worse. If this is not treated, all those other things are only going to help you a little bit. And for those of you who have been diagnosed with sleep apnea and are supposed to be using a CPAP machine, I am just going to flat out say right now, you have got to do it. Because literally, I know a woman who died because she refused to use her CPAP machine. She went to bed one night, she didn't breathe for long enough that she died, right? No oxygen to her brain. The next morning, her husband found her and her 2 kids were left without a mom. This is literally a life or death thing. You please figure out how to use your CPAP machine. Now, I will tell you that it is not easy getting used to, and there are lots of different kinds of machines, different kinds of masks, different things you can use with your masks. If you ever have any trouble getting used to this, please go back to your sleep doctor, talk to them about the struggles that you're having. This is something I help my clients with because I use a CPAP machine, so I've gone through all of this myself. But we've got to get that addressed because if your brain's not getting oxygen at night, if you're stopping your breath and you're not getting oxygen to your brain, you are going to hurt, you're going to have brain fog, you're going to be tired, and there's not a whole lot else we can really do to fix that until you get good sleep. So as we're working on improving our sleep, number one, you're going to get a sleep study done. Don't just have an in-home one, try to get a lab one, but sometimes we got to do one before we can do the other. So we've got to do that. But we want to focus on how we can get to sleep. We need to focus on improving our deep sleep. And then we need to lower that stress response, which is one of the reasons why that was number 5 in my previous list. Work on lowering that overactive fight or flight. That'll help you with your sleep. Now, Dr. Lipton's book, The Fibro Manual, has an amazing chapter on this right here. And she lists out a bunch of different supplements and medications that help with getting you to sleep, improving your deep sleep, and lowering that stress response. So number 1, as a patient, after you've been diagnosed, we got to start improving your sleep. Number 2, we have to learn to live within our energy budget. This is something you can do on your own for the most part, but sometimes it also requires figuring out why you've got low energy in the first place. Like it might not just be fibromyalgia, so you're going to want to be talking with your doctor about the obvious reasons that you might be fatigued. Things like anemia or, whatever it might be, doing some basic labs to just double check all of that. Now, if you want more information on living within your energy budget, I would recommend that episode 35, where I talk about my favorite energy management tool. Definitely listen to that. I would also recommend listening to episode 44, where you are designing your dream week. A lot of us aren't very realistic about what we can do in a week. So we have all these expectations and we make all of these commitments. And then when we try to actually do them, we come up against our energy limits, right? And so we end up having to cancel. The Dream Week exercise that I give my clients helps you to plan that out and be more purposeful about how you're spending your energy, how you're spending your day. Where is your rest time? Where is your family time? Where's your work time? And actually making a budget for how you're going to spend your energy. So I would recommend listening to that. And again, all of these links are going to be on today's show notes page, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/69. So number 2, learn to live within your energy budget. Number 3, we need to break the pain cycle. Now, even before I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I had a doctor who told me, your body has learned how to be in pain, and we need to teach it how to not be in pain. It's recognizing every signal that comes to it as pain, pain, pain. And we need to teach it that some of these signals are just touch or pressure or, whatever it might be. So we need to break that pain cycle. This includes things like removing any potential pain triggers. So if you have a bad knee and you've been thinking about having surgery and you're afraid it might cause you more pain, most likely having that surgery will cause you more pain in the short run, but in the long run, it's actually removing a pain trigger, and it could, in the long run, lower all of your pain. So address those pain triggers, go to your doctor. Don't just think of fibro pain, but if you have specific areas, like I mentioned, having a bad knee, or if you've got a shoulder that bothers you, or neck pain or headaches or whatever it might be, talk to your doctor about those specific pains. And if they are lumping everything into, oh, you're just feeling that because that's fibromyalgia, but they're not actually doing the MRI, doing the exam, like really checking out why you hurt, please go find a new doctor. I have had so many clients. I have one of my clients went to the doctor, kept trying to, she had a hip that hurt and kept being told it was just her fibromyalgia, finally went somewhere else. And she had, I don't know, a crazy number, like 5 torn ligaments or something like that in her hip. It was crazy. So please, if you don't have a doctor who is checking these things out, if they're just lumping it all under the fibromyalgia category, find someone to check it out. Someone in my support group years and years ago literally went to another town to a different emergency room to have people who didn't know her check her out because everybody kept telling her, oh, it's just your fibromyalgia. Okay. So check out all those pain triggers, and we need to do things to break the pain cycle. Now, I will tell you that this particular item is probably going to take some medication. And I don't necessarily mean opioid pain medication, right? Like I'm not just talking Vicodin here. We need to break that pain cycle in multiple ways. So there's lots of different medications that can help. The different ways your brain processes pain, the different ways your pain receptors in your body, your skin are processing pain. So there can be a bunch of different ways to address this. We can also break that pain cycle by the choices that we make, right? If you're one of those people that is always pushing and pushing and pushing, and you're doing all the things, you may need to have to stop doing some of those things for a while so that your body can learn how to not be in pain. And just like if you broke your foot and you needed to stay off of it for 6 weeks to let it heal, there may be some things we need to stop doing for a while with fibromyalgia to let your body heal. Probably going to be longer than 6 weeks, but you can get to a point where your body learns how to not be in pain, and then you can try doing some of those things again. This could also be things like certain foods that you eat that increase your pain. Maybe if you have a lot of sugar or alcohol or caffeine, maybe that increases your pain levels. Start realizing, paying attention, writing that in your body's owner's manual, writing that in your book of you, and start to break that pain cycle. I talk about a lot of different ways that you can address your pain in my first book, Take Back Your Life. So go to today's show notes. We'll have a link where you can grab a copy of that for free and just check out that chapter on how to reduce your pain. And that'll give you a bunch of the different medications I'm talking about, supplements that can help with that, and a few other things as well. All right. Number 4. Give your body the nutritional building blocks it needs. Now, there are some very specific things with fibromyalgia that we typically tend to need to fix, right? One of the big ones is protein. Most of us with fibromyalgia are not eating enough protein. You should be having between 80 and 100 grams of protein every day. Protein deficiency can actually cause pain. Protein, there should be a certain amount of protein in the fluid in your joints. And if you don't eat enough protein, there's not enough protein in those joints, and your joints will hurt. So a lack of protein will lead to a bunch of things that cause pain. So make sure you're getting enough protein. I will say, if you're a vegetarian, this will be harder just because it is, right? I mean, you have a piece of chicken, it's mostly all protein. There is protein in vegetables, it's true, but you have to be a lot more conscious about getting that number up. And for my clients who are vegetarian, they usually have to have some type of protein supplement, whether that's a shake or bar or whatever it is, to make sure they're getting enough protein. Protein gives your body the building blocks to repair. It gives you all of the amino acids that give you all the neurotransmitters you need, right? So protein is where your body makes serotonin and norepinephrine and GABA, and all of those amino acids come from the protein building blocks. So make sure you're getting enough protein. This is one of the simplest ways that you can change your diet. I mean, of course, get rid of the junk. I think that goes without saying. Most of you already know that, right? But do add protein. So if you're sitting down and you're, looking at a menu and you get to choose something off the menu, make the best protein choice that you can. And I'll be honest, sometimes that means things like, if I'm going to have spaghetti, maybe I will, if I'm at the grocery store, I literally do this. When I'm at the grocery store, I will pick the spaghetti that has extra protein in it. Now, that is not going to give me a lot of protein for sure, right? But it gives me more than I would have if I didn't choose that one, right? I will do things like add nuts or add cheese or, lots of different things like that to just add a little bit more protein to what I'm eating. So track your, you can use an app like MyFitnessPal, or there's tons of apps out there tracking your food. Just track your protein intake, see if you're getting enough. We also want to make sure that we're getting enough of the other nutrients that we need. And vitamin D is one of those that most of us need with fibromyalgia. Magnesium is another one, B12, iron, all of those things. You can have your doctor run some labs and just check and see where you're at and see what it is that you should take. This can be very individualized. If you're living in Florida, you definitely need less vitamin D than I do, living way up here in Washington, right? So definitely have your doctor run those labs and make those choices for what you need. But I guarantee you there's some nutritional building blocks your body is missing. And, since our bodies were made to repair themselves, it only makes sense. We give the body what it needs. It can do the work it's supposed to do in repair, right? Now, number 5, and the last one I'm going to give you, is to have your doctor check your thyroid and your adrenals. Now, this one, I left it for last because it can be sometimes a little bit tricky to get the right tests done and have your doctors look at them in the right way. So if you're having thyroid labs done, don't just do a TSH. Have a full thyroid panel. Also, make sure that your doctor is checking those against functional labs, functional levels, not just the standard lab levels, right? So the functional levels, I talk about this in a previous episode. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's the one about, why are my labs wrong? This is one of the things that happens often. When you get your labs done, I'll just use thyroid as an example because this happens all the time. People will go by what is called the lab range. And the lab range is a pretty wide range, and it's made up of all the people who kind of come through that lab, right? So it could be a very broad range. The functional range is a much narrower range, and it's the range that your body functions at the best. Now, if you need any help with this, this is something that I do train my coaches in. Obviously, we're not doctors, we're not diagnosing or anything like that, but we can teach you how to ask for the right labs. We can help you find the right people that are going to read them the right way, and we can kind of help you get this figured out. I will tell you that with the students that have come through my Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class, probably, maybe 3/4 of them end up realizing that they had some kind of a thyroid thing going on that was being missed. And about 1/3 of them end up being diagnosed with autoimmune thyroid, with Hashimoto's, even though they have had their thyroid checked before and their doctors always said it was fine and it was, quote, normal. The deeper we dug, we found these things. So I would say that it is pretty rare for me to work with a patient who doesn't have something going on with their thyroid. I would say pretty rare. Almost all of my clients have had something going on with their thyroid, and most of them had doctors who said it was fine. And that was usually because the doctor just wasn't looking deep enough and in enough places. So check your thyroid, full thyroid panel. And again, if you need any help with this, just schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, and we can talk to you some more about this. The second part of this is checking your adrenals. And in a similar way, most doctors are not checking your adrenals in the way that makes sense. Now, I talk about this in my book, Take Back Your Life, and I even show you my own adrenal test results. I have pictures of my own adrenal test results in there, so you can see more about what I'm talking about with this. But again, very, very few of my clients have perfectly functioning adrenal glands. So if your adrenals are low, then that's going to give you fatigue, that's going to give you brain fog, all of that. So those are the key things that when I'm working with a new client, I'm always asking them. So in terms of labs, just as a summary, so those 5 things again: work on improving your sleep, learn to live within your energy budget, break that pain cycle, give your body the nutritional building blocks it needs, and check your thyroid and adrenals. So within those 5 things, the lab tests that we're looking for with your doctors are that full thyroid panel, something called an adrenal stress index. We also want to have that sleep study, and then some basic labs that are checking things like vitamin D, iron, B12, all of those typical kinds of things that you might check. Now, if your doctor is not familiar with these things that I'm talking about, you may need to find a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor And if you're looking for one of those two, I'll give you a couple of resources. First of all, the Functional Medicine Organization website. It's functionalmedicine.org. It's super simple. They have a physician locator, and so you'll be able to look for a functional medicine trained doctor in your area. Same thing with the naturopathic physicians. So you're just going to search in your Google search, you're going to search for naturopathic organization or naturopathic association and your state. So here in Washington, I would search for Washington Naturopathic Association, and that will give me their website, and they almost always have a physician locator. So that'll get you started. Of course, just because they know functional medicine or just because they're a naturopath, that doesn't mean they know how to treat fibromyalgia. So don't expect that you're going to, be able to choose anybody off the list and they're going to know what to do with your fibro. But when it comes to things like your thyroid, your adrenals, testing your nutritional deficiencies, those kinds of things, I would trust any of them for that. Okay, so let me just go ahead and recap all of this for you. You're newly diagnosed, you're not sure what to do. Number one, educate yourself. Go listen to podcast episodes, grab my books, consider joining our advisor program. Number two, find yourself a guide. Maybe your doctor, maybe a coach, maybe a friend who has had fibromyalgia for a long time. But don't take advice from somebody that you wouldn't want to trade places with, and don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. Number three, start tracking your symptoms. Make sure you go download those tracking logs, listen to the episode about how to track your steps. Number four, start your book of you. Start writing your body's owner's manual. Number five, start to work on calming your overactive fight or flight. And then with your doctor, number one, you're going to work on improving your sleep, having a sleep study done, working on all of that. Number two, you're going to learn to live within your energy budget. And part of that is budgeting your energy, but part of that is also looking at what might be taking away from your energy, running some tests with your doctor. Number three, we're going to break that pain cycle, reducing triggers, doing other things to help reduce your pain, teach your body how to not be in pain. Number four, we're going to give your body the building blocks it needs. And number five, make sure you check your thyroid and adrenals. Now, I'm going to give you a few more podcast episodes that I would recommend taking a look at that kind of go along with everything that I'm talking about today. The first one is episode 30. Where do I start? This was one of our Ask the Coach episodes. Now, this one kind of comes at that question from a slightly different angle. Today, I gave you some very specific things to start doing. Episode 30 is more about how do I choose which things to start on? And there's some general guidance there in terms of, okay, I've got all of these things that I can maybe try to help manage my energy. How do I pick which one to start with? I can't do them all. So episode 30 gives you some guidance on choosing where to start that way. Episode 40 is another Ask the Coach. And in that one, I answer the question, should I go outside my insurance for fibromyalgia treatment? And short answer is yes, but I go into the details in episode 40, and it might help you to hear some of that. In episode 43, I get into some specifics about what it actually takes to get better. And you'll be surprised, not a lot of these are medical things. They're a lot more about how you manage how you think about your illness, some of that kind of stuff. But they are absolutely critical if you actually want to get better. Number 57, episode 57, is all about how to talk to others about your fibromyalgia. And that can be a difficult thing when you're newly diagnosed. And so I wanted to mention that episode to give you a little bit of guidance. So again, that's episode 57. We'll have all the links in today's show notes, but I would recommend listening to that one so that you can get some ideas about how to share about your new diagnosis, who to share with, how much to share, all of that kind of stuff. So that is a great one for people who are newly diagnosed. I also want to mention episode 16. If you are newly diagnosed or have a child who's newly diagnosed, so if you're newly diagnosed and you're young, if you have a child who's been diagnosed, I would also recommend episode 16, which is about fibromyalgia in children with Dr. Melissa Congdon. There is also an episode with one of my coaches, Jaira Halfin, and it is about the impact of juvenile fibromyalgia on families. So if you're listening to this and you're young, or if you're a mom listening to this and your child has fibromyalgia, I would recommend episode 16 and episode 25. So there is there's a whole list for you. Again, I will have all of these episodes listed out in today's show notes. So don't try to remember all of that. I am aware that you have fibromyalgia and that you have brain fog. So just go out to today's show notes. If you're listening to this in your favorite podcasting app, there's probably a link right there that'll take you to today's show notes. We'll have all those episodes listed there, and those other resources that I mentioned, whether it is downloading those symptom trackers or the worksheets that go with the Dream Week exercise or the Book of You exercise. All of those things will be out there in today's show notes. So all you have to do is go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/69 or click that link in your podcasting app. All right, so that is going to wrap us up for today. I do want to mention that our next Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class starts next week. So as this episode releases on August 31st, our next advisor class begins next week. So if you are interested in joining us, go check that link out at the time of recording this. I do still have a couple spaces left. I do purposefully keep those classes small so that you have lots of time with me, and also pair you up with your own fibro coach. But this is absolutely the best way I know to educate yourself and to improve your fibromyalgia. If you have any questions, just reach out to us, and I will be back in 2 weeks with episode 70, where I am going to talk about literally what does Tammy do every day to manage her fibromyalgia. I'm also going to talk about some of the things that I've done leading up to now, because trust me, if you start with what I'm doing right now, number one, it would be overwhelming. And number two, it actually wouldn't be enough, which sounds contradictory, but you'll get it all next time. I want to give you an example of what my life looks like now with fibromyalgia in remission, without fibromyalgia pain, running a business, being a wife, all the things. But I'm also going to share some of the things that I've done along the way that have helped get me here. All right. I will see you back here in 2 weeks when we do our next Ask the Coach. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.